Hello everybody, this is Gemini Jets 1975 coming at you with another video today. Today I'll be doing a brief history and route maps on TWA. So with me today I have a very special guest. We have Aviation JXXX. Please say hello.
Hello everyone.
Alrighty. And Jay's going to kind of listen in on the video. This one is dedicated to a friend of mine in the St. Louis area whose family has ties to TWA. So thank you to him for being the inspiration to this video. Okay, so let's get started here. My first map is from 1973. In 1973, TWA was still flying round the world services. I believe that's actually the year that they started. It might have actually been 1969, but so if you look at the U.S. map, they had tons of transcon flights from Washington D.C., Baltimore, Philadelphia, New York, and Boston to San Francisco and Los Angeles, a little bit to Vegas, Phoenix, and then what would soon, or what would later become their main hub in St. Louis. You had flights to Florida, and then of course Kansas City, which was also one of the big hubs. And but as you can tell, they weren't really that huge of an airline domestically, but they did have a lot of connecting service, unlike their friends over at Pan Am. Okay, so let's go over to the international map depicting around the world services. So here, of course, you had, DC, Philly, New York, Boston, the same places that had huge connecting flights to the West Coast. Of course, Los Angeles. And very deep services into Europe. You also had Tel Aviv, a little bit into Africa, the Middle East, and then, of course, Europe. And then the round the world services would go from Tel Aviv to Bombay, Bombay to Bangkok, Bangkok to Hong Kong, and then Hong Kong to Guam, Guam over to Honolulu, and then Honolulu back to LA. Okay, a little bit of, I believe in, it was either 75 or 77, I don't remember which year. TWA did a route swap with Pan Am. Basically, the Los Angeles to Honolulu, Honolulu to Guam, Guam to Hong Kong, Hong Kong to Bangkok, I believe even Bangkok to Bombay. Basically, that whole, from the Pacific all the way over to Asia, was traded to, or I'm sorry, from Bangkok to the U.S. was traded to Pan Am. Bombay was dropped. And then TWA got services to, I believe, Paris in Europe, and possibly, although they already served Paris. And there might have been another city. It's been a while since I've read that, but so that ended TWA's round the world flights. Okay, so the next map that we have here is 1980. So you see there was kind of a little bitty, kind of a hub type operation in Pittsburgh, New York, Chicago, and then St. Louis got bigger, Kansas City. Basically, their domestic services increased quite a bit. Still a lot of transcontinental flying. And then if you look at international, everything beyond Tel Aviv was canceled. So from Tel Aviv all the way around to the rest of, to Honolulu was dropped or traded. So what remained, you had a little bit in Europe. This did expand a little bit later because by 1985 they had added some more cities in Europe. Okay, so in 1985 there was a huge consolidation onto St. Louis. This was about the time they purchased Ozark Airlines as well. So New York, JFK, of course, was the big European hub, and then St. Louis for domestic. And then Kansas City still remains somewhat important by this time. So this is more like what the route map looked like at the end of TWA's life. And then, of course, right here, you had services extended to Cairo. From Cairo to Riyadh. And then you had, let me see, Athens, Rome, and then you had Barcelona, Madrid. So many cities were added in Europe. And then, of course, nothing on the West Coast. So, but they still had LA to London. All right, so let's go back here. Now we're in 1988. Much more consolidation into St. Louis, and of course New York JFK. All right, and then in Europe, still quite a few cities, probably some, there are some secondary cities added: Oslo, Stockholm, Istanbul, Cairo and Tel Aviv were actually fairly profitable. I believe they had those right up until the very end. And then interesting here was kind of the start or the beginning of the San Juan mini hub, but that didn't really get going until the mid to late 90s before the purchase by American. But so here, the Los Angeles, this was before the sale, right before the sale of the London Heathrow route authorities. Okay, and then also TW Express had started operations by this time, so mainly out of St. Louis, of course. Okay. All right. Now for one of my printed route maps. This was from 1993 with the ill-fated hub in Atlanta. They actually had a flight to London out of Atlanta. Interesting. And then so you had New York, JFK, and of course St. Louis. St. Louis or San Juan routes remained, and then of course here's Europe, which by this time they were holding their own. Right. And then right here is, this is about 1999, possibly 2000. This was kind of at the end, so you had this little mini hub in San Juan, flights to Aruba, Orlando, Fort Lauderdale. So they were kind of starting this Caribbean push. Montego Bay, Cancun, all out of St. Louis. And then, of course, there was San Juan to Los Angeles. So, and then they were kind of trying to start transcon flights again. There was a Washington, D.C. to L.A., St. Louis to London and Paris instead of just London. All right, so here is the international map. Unfortunately, Europe had basically been completely destroyed. You only had London, Paris, and then Cairo and Riyadh. But the focus was being re-established, or their attention was drawn toward the Caribbean instead. Here is TW Express out of St. Louis. Let's see, Shreveport, Jackson, Charleston, so fairly large TW Express network. And of course, you cannot forget, actually this was right before 9/11, guys, so this was 10/9/01. And then of course here is New York JFK. So this was kind of right at the end. And cannot forget about TW Connection. Let's see, no date on this page. TW Connection in Los Angeles. So now guys, those of you who know a lot about TWA, you know obviously I left out a ton of history, but this was mainly to be about route maps and their general route map and I can't talk today, sorry guys. It was basically about their route map in general, not so much about their actual history, because if I talked about that, that would probably be a 30-minute video or longer, so I really did not want to bore you with that. But needless to say, TWA's history was, you know, very interesting. If you would like something more about their actual history, let me know. I do have a book basically just like the one about Delta that I did a couple years ago. So let me know if you want to see that. Anyways, guys, thank you so much as always for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And I will see you guys in the next video.